We recognize the brain-body connection or mind-body connection. These are all good things, but then we suddenly veer way off course in a way that is harmful to people who are dealing with anxiety.
So a lot of people don't understand the difference between having anxiety, which everybody has. That's a normal human experience. If you are anxious because there's something going on in your life, you can use tools like breathing or calming. We define the disorder by the state that you reach where the feeling itself is now the problem. You try to control that state and prevent it from happening and manually operate your body and your mind to prevent thoughts and block them and change them, or prevent your body from doing things that it is naturally designed to do, even when those things are unpleasant. So in health anxiety, it has nothing to do with the health. It has everything to do with the anxiety, because you're only trying to operate on the anxiety, and the anxiety or the fear or the uncertainty is what tells you that you have a health problem.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and coach. You're on the Steady Coach. And today I have one of the most useful interviews you will ever hear if you are dealing with health anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, or obsessive compulsive thought patterns, or just lots of anxiety, rumination, and doubts during your recovery from neural circuit dizziness and other medically unexplained chronic symptoms. Today, I am talking to Drew Linsalata, who is an expert in anxiety disorders and treatment. He has his own podcast. He's an author. He's a therapist, and he has worked with literally thousands of people who've been dealing with anxiety disorders. And he's here to share his wisdom on how that work can translate into how you might approach neural circuit dizziness recovery, maybe a little bit differently from how you've been. Something important before we dive in. If you're listening to this conversation, I know chances are you are scared and you are dealing with a lot of doubts about your ability to recover from your symptoms. And I want to make my position on this extremely clear. It is my belief that you can fully recover from neural circuit dizziness and other medically unexplained chronic symptoms. At a few points in this interview, you're going to hear Drew and I have minor disagreements about a few points related to anxiety. And your fearful mind might hear that as some kind of implication that we're saying, oh, you can never recover or you have to manage this forever. That is not what we're saying, which is why I wanted to mention it before you get started. So if you get to that point in the conversation and you need to hear me say this again, rewind the video to the intro. Now let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right into this conversation with Drew Linsalata. Give us a like, share, subscribe, follow, all those things. Enjoy. This is a good one. Drew Linsalata, welcome to the Steady Coach. Absolutely amazing to have you here. Long time coming. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you, Yonit. Dr. Yo.
I am very excited to dive into all sorts of things with you today, particularly health anxiety. I think that's going to be the biggest topic today. But I think this is going to be part interview, part conversation, part meeting of the minds, because we have some things to talk about first. And the first thing I want to talk about is this general idea that dizziness and other physical symptoms are just anxiety. You're an anxiety specialist, and I know many people watching my channel have been told, by physicians or other people, oh, you're just anxious. You just need to stop being anxious and then your symptoms will go away. And that's what all this is. So I'm wondering if we can start by squaring this. Yeah. So is dizziness, are other symptoms like dizziness just anxiety?
No. Well, sometimes, but not automatically. And I agree with you, by the way. I have people who have legitimate, actual falling over, tipping, can't stand up, room spinning, vestibular issues that have been told by physicians that they're just anxious. No, no, that's not a thing. Like, so, that off balance feeling is a common anxiety symptom. So yeah, sometimes, and I have to work really carefully with people to say, well, they'll say, well, I'm dizzy. All right, well, are you actually dizzy? Or you just have that, I'm sort of on a boat feeling and it feels like I'm going to tip over, but I'm not tipping over. I'm rock solid. I'm good. Okay, there's a good chance that that is an anxiety presentation because it's a common presentation for all human beings. But no, not all dizziness is just anxiety.
Yeah.
I can't imagine people are being told that. It's not cool.
They still are, but I think this really gets to the heart of, I think, my work and also just a change I'm starting to see. I'm leading us into this conversation on health anxiety. Hang on. So there's this new cultural acceptance, shall we say, that the mind and body might somehow be connected. Who'd have thought that the two things actually talk to each other, interestingly enough. So there's this newfound awareness that maybe when someone has physical symptoms and having anxiety or having emotional distress might not be two separate, distinct things. They can be part of the same process.
Okay.
And they can feed each other. So I think overall, that's a really good trend. And I'm wondering if you've, first of all, seen that in your work. And then we're going to talk about how this all goes sideways for people who have health anxiety.
Yeah. I've definitely seen it in my work. I mean, for me, that's not news, right? I'm very fond of saying like anxious bodies do anxious body things. So like and it's not, we actually have language and people are tired of me hearing these phrases, but there's a reason why we have language that we all understand in the West. Like I felt like I was going to hurl, or I had butterflies in my stomach, or, oh my goodness, when he told me I lost my job, the room started spinning. There is a reason why we all understand those little linguistic idioms, right? Because upset people feel upset in their bodies.
Yes.
And conversely, when we are ill or sick or injured or in pain, we will have emotional and psychological reactions to that. So the idea that there's some sort of mystical, magical brain-body connection that we've just decided to discover is ridiculous. And where it goes off the rails is, oh, well, now we recognize that connection. Oh, so now we can operate it. There are knobs and levers.
Oh, yes.
And no, we can't. We know how the sun works. We can't operate the sun. There's a difference, right? So
this is where we're going. You work with a lot of people with anxiety, so you can already see how this really good thing, this good thing, okay, we recognize the brain-body connection or mind-body connection, feelings and your mental state and your physical state are all intertwined. These are all good things. But then we suddenly veer way off course in a way that is harmful to people who are dealing with anxiety. And so here's my soapbox. When someone develops, you're here for it, aren't you?
I'm here for that. I'm here for all of this. Yeah.
Okay. When people develop a vestibular issue, one of the side effects of having a dizziness problem, whether it's anxiety or not anxiety, whether you had a physical issue with your ear or a concussion or whatever, it leads to physiologic anxiety. It leads to an anxiety response because your brain says, holy crap, I'm not oriented. What's going on?
Sure.
So what ends up happening is by default, people with certain symptoms, regardless of how they started, end up with anxiety. And when the brain is contending with both symptoms and anxiety, sometimes it ends up in an anxiety disorder pattern, even if someone never had an anxiety disorder to begin with.
Yep.
So what ends up happening is these people start to say, okay, I found Yonit, brain-body connection, like, okay, this is maybe something to do with my stress. This is something to do with my distress. I need to change how I respond to symptoms. And then they find exactly what you were talking about. You didn't use these terms, but like the nervous system optimization.
Oh, do not get me started.
Oh, we're getting started. That's where we're going. Yeah. Yep. So they find this entire universe of nervous system optimization techniques, breathing, vagus nerve exercises.
Oh, I got to get into the ventral vagal state.
Yes. I've got to breathe. And to be clear, from my perspective, there are very few bad tools, but there are many tools that can be applied badly.
Yeah.
So this applies very specifically when someone transitions from having just dizziness or just some kind of symptom into having an anxiety disorder-like pattern.
Sure.
So I'm wondering if you can start by explaining what that might look like. Like, at what point do we say it's not just dizziness, we actually have an anxiety disorder relationship with the dizziness?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can talk about that. So a lot of people don't understand the difference between having anxiety, which everybody has. That's a normal human experience that we're never trying to erase because it serves a function, and an anxiety disorder. Two different things. And in fact, the advice or the tools or the wellness approaches will differ greatly. Because if you are, anxious because there's something going on in your life that's pressing on you and it creates this anxiety response in you, you can use tools like breathing or calming, or like I'm gonna take a break or whatever, hot bath, whatever, like write poetry. I'm a fan of all of those things. That's correct. Anxiety disorder is not the presence of anxiety. If you are anxious all day long, you may not have an anxiety disorder. We define the disorder by the state that you reach where the feeling itself is now the problem, and you begin to modify your life. It becomes restricted. There's a lot of conditions. You ritualize things like an OCD. This is not OCD, by the way, but to try to control that state and prevent it from happening and manually operate your body and your mind to prevent thoughts and quiet them down and block them and change them, or prevent your body from doing things that it is naturally designed to do, even when those things are unpleasant. That's what an anxiety disorder looks like. And I can only diagnose that as a therapist when there's a functional impact. And I'm sure that in your world, there's a lot of functional impact. So a vestibular problem by itself will have functional impact.
That's the tricky part.
Yes. But then when your functional impact is based on, no, I can't do that because it might trigger my anxiety, and that's no bueno, I cannot possibly go there. Now I care. And when do you tip over? I'm the guy that gets involved when control and avoidance strategies run amok and make things worse. They seem like common sense, but they are making things worse.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, great. And now we're going to talk about nervous system regulation. Let's go there. So,
all right, let's do it.
Yeah. So again, as you said, those tools can be used well, as I said earlier, but they can also be used very poorly when we've transitioned into what you just described, a state where someone is trying to avoid a particular state and trying to manage a particular state. And I recognize this is really thorny and tricky for vestibular disorders because, as I said before, and you just alluded to, the symptoms themselves can cause a lot of need for, let's just say, managing things differently in your life.
Sure.
But what's often being told to people is you need to stop being anxious. And what you need to do is calm yourself down.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that. Why does that not work?
There are some principles that in my world we take. Listen, everybody's different, and we have to apply these principles uniquely to each individual person, but we have to rely on certain, we're going to call them universal truths. You cannot decide what not to think. You can decide what to think. If I say, hey, Yonit, think of a pistachio ice cream cone, too late, you're already dead. If I tell you don't, you're screwed, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So you can't decide what not to think. You can't decide what to think to replace what you don't like thinking. That just flat out doesn't work. You cannot decide what emotion to have or not have. You just can't. I dare you, anybody listening right now, to instantly create happiness. Go ahead, we'll wait. You can't do it. And if sadness comes up while you're listening to us, you can't prevent it either. So we do not get to control our emotions. And we do not get to micromanage our bodies as much as we really want to, because sometimes they make us feel so uncomfortable. So for me, I hate when people talk about nervous system reset, nervous system healing, and nervous system regulation. Why? Because if you keep screaming at your nervous system that your own thoughts, emotions, and body are enemies and threats, it is just following your instructions. So it's like turning the radio up to 10 and then trying to fix the speakers because your ears hurt. They're only doing what you're asking it to do. There's no dysregulation there. There's no disease. There's no disorder. There's no neurological malfunction. There's no neuroscience needed here. Your body is following your instructions. If you have decided that any possibility of an elevated heart rate, shortness of breath, or any hint that you might be getting dizzy is a nightmare and you must shut your life down, then your nervous system will respond accordingly. It's doing its job according to what you're asking it to do.
That's right.
Well, that was a lot of words.
No, that was so well said. So what I imagined in my mind when you said that was, the circus game, like whack-a-mole,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah. So like,
I use whack-a-mole all the time as a
yeah,
metaphor. Yeah.
yeah. And it's almost like you're up there trying to like hit the mole with this thing, but then you're not actually addressing what's actually the underlying thing that's keeping the mole coming up.
Well, the
all.
underlying thing is that you're afraid that a mole will come up. The mole is not the problem. The problem is that you're afraid that there might be a mole, right? So people will often say, oh, the problem is the lighting. And I'm going to say stuff that I'm sure you've heard every day.
Oh,
it's the lighting in the supermarket. It's those fluorescent lights. No, we don't have those anymore, but whatever. Like back in the day, I would hear like, oh, it's the flickering of the fluorescent lights is at a perfect frequency that influences my GABA receptors. And people would go down that road, right? It has nothing to do with the lights or the supermarket or the traffic. Now, in a vestibular situation, of course, maybe that rapid motion is going to be a trigger for you, but it has to do with, I am afraid that I might feel this way. And therefore, I begin to associate different contexts, people, tasks, places with that feeling. And now I become very avoidant and restrictive in the way I interact with my life.
Yes. And the problem is then when this is uniquely damaging to people who have a dizziness issue, because in many cases, in the vast majority of cases, chronic dizziness is something that you can recover from. It's not a neurological issue. It's not a tissue damage related problem. It's a brain programming issue.
Okay.
And people know, they learn this from me.
Yep.
And then they say, okay, so I need to really control this thing and I need to change my brain. I need to rewire my brain.
Right.
And by doing that, they get worse. They get worse because of what you just said. They find these tools. They find my channel. They're like, okay, I need to feel all my emotions. I need to resolve all my stress. I need to do all my breathing. Yeah. Again, great. These are great tools, but used in this context cause more damage than helping people.
When somebody is trying very hard to stay calm, they will not be calm. Because that attempt creates a checking state, right? There's a metacognitive mechanism that happens that says, how am I feeling now? Okay, hang on. Let me do my deep breathing so I calm down. And invariably, if you set out on a task that has a box to check, that metacognitive checking mechanism will check to see if the box is in fact being checked. And if it's not being checked to your satisfaction, things get worse. We amp up.
Yes.
So when I work with people who are experiencing elevated levels of anxiety that they think is horrible, unhandleable, they must stop it. And they try for years sometimes to implement 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and put my feet in the grass and ice packs and this and that and the other. And they'll get really discouraged. Like, nothing works for me. I know, because when you grab the ice pack, which sometimes we can use that, by the way, we're talking about a very specific context here that I think we're sharing. People will get really discouraged because they'll start to say like nothing works, but that's because they're trying to forcibly calm down. Like, we got to talk about calm down, because calm down happens, by the way. You just can't make it happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. So, because all the type A people are taking notes here and they're like, okay, so you're telling me that I need to calm down, but I can't try to calm down. So what am I supposed to do? And what I tell them to do is, you're supposed to do nothing, but that's,
I know it's a very hard sell.
It's a very hard to sell.
And listen, we clearly speak the same language. You know, I'm fortunate. My podcast created a reasonably large audience, but it's not near. I have millions of people following me. I would have many more people following along and buying my books and things of that nature if I taught them how to regulate, because that's an easy sell. Here's 5 things you must know about anxiety to regulate and heal your nervous system. Click, 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 like, follow. When I'm out there telling people, as you are, when you get really anxious, you have to learn to do nothing about that. Unfollow. You don't know what you're talking about. Clearly, you've never experienced this. I know. I get it every day. It's okay. I have a thick skin. I understand people are hurting. One of the things I would invite your listeners right now, or viewers, think of a time for a second when you were very happy. That might have been yesterday. Could be this morning. Could be 10 years ago. I don't know. Do you feel that now? Are you feeling that now? The answer is going to be no. Spoiler alert, no. Why is that? In fact, we lament the fact that happiness does not last. When we can recognize, oh, I'm in a really good moment right now. It's a shame this is going to have to end. We write songs about it, for God's sake. We write books and poems about it. Every internal experience ends. Every last one. There are no exceptions to that. No one has ever got stuck in anger, guilt. Now, they may cycle and repeat, which is fine, but all internal experiences repeat. So we use emotional processing theory, which gives us that blueprint that says, at left to their own devices, every internal experience will rise, peak, and fall. Now, if you're on guard, you may have an undulating curve where it'll come back again and again and again. You know where that mainly comes from? Okay, it's gone away. Is it going away? Is it still going away? Is it going to come back? Bam, you're re-triggered into the next one. It's such a hard sell, but if you do nothing, that experience will pass and change organically. And nobody believes that until they do it. And then they believe it. Then they believe it.
Yep. I feel like most of my channel now, I mean, I'll qualify what I'm about to say, but for those of you with anxiety, those of you dealing with a lot of doubts, anxiety, fear, worries, rumination, the vast majority of the stuff on my channel for you is me telling you different ways of doing nothing and tricking you into doing nothing by telling you to do something that actually gets you to do nothing.
Yeah.
Like I have this meditation. It's not even out on YouTube yet. It'll maybe be out by the time this comes out, where basically I have people, I called it a somatic exercise. I'm going to see how people respond to it. But basically I'm just through up this whole somatic exercise. I'm having people feel the anxiety and let it be there. That's basically what it is.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. We clearly speak the same language. I'm at war all the time with the people who use the word somatic because they somehow turn somatic into a calming or a technique that is special. And like, oh, if someone had just taught me these 3 somatic exercises, I would have. That's not what it's for.
I hear you. Yeah. I hear you. I get really nitpicky about language also. One of the things that I get really nitpicky about is management. That's a word I particularly hate. And I go to war when I hear that particular word. I just think it's an awful word.
Yeah.
But I hear you on the somatic. What really upsets me is just when it's framed as this is a thing you need to do. It's a doing thing that you need to do to fight this thing that is self-healing. If you get out of its way, your nervous system and your brain know what to do. But that's really what it's all about, getting out of its way.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I mean, now in your audience, clearly these people with vestibular issues, that doesn't make that go away. So like,
it does.
Well, to a certain extent.
Often.
Okay.
Well, actually,
I would not
often
disagree with you. That's exactly right. I mean, the person that has a vestibular issue, so once in a long while, I do not have a chronic vestibular issue. I don't even claim remotely the same experience as your audience. But a couple of times a year, I will have PPPD, right? And that's room spinning, eye shaking, nystagmus, the whole night.
Yeah.
I will do much better when I have one of those episodes because I have learned to do nothing. I can just lay there and let my eyes shake and let the room spin until the crystals settle down. I have that type of vertigo. And it's much worse if I start to freak out and try to control the experience. So I believe that you are correct. Yeah.
Yes.
But that's what I said before, when control and management, and same thing, you will not find the word manage anywhere on anything I've ever written because I ain't going there. And when I want to control this, and just because you want to doesn't mean you can. And that's going to go off the rails. I tend to agree. Like learning to do nothing is really tough, but you can do something to learn to do nothing. So I agree with you too. I often tell people, do the most reckless thing you could think of. Do a crossword puzzle. What is that going to do? Nothing. And that's the point. Yes. Completely reckless. You're not saving yourself at all. You're going to do a puzzle. What? Isn't that distraction? Well, there's always an element of distraction, and that's okay. Just like, no, I'm using that to teach myself that it's actually safe to pet my dog.
Amazing.
Or do a puzzle while I'm freaking out.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's break down the mechanics of health anxiety specifically. I mean, really everything that we've talked about thus far is applicable to health anxiety. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the majority of people I see who are dealing with the problems that we just talked about have this manifest as health anxiety. So, and for the majority of people watching this channel, the health anxiety becomes the thing that's locking the dizziness in place. The vestibular issue, it was BPPV or again, neuritis, something legitimately physical. That's past. That's long past. And the brain can compensate for all sorts of problems, but it's not compensating. The brain's not compensating because it's still on high alert because now we have health anxiety.
Yep.
So can you just explain what health anxiety means, like what it actually is?
Sure. So health anxiety is In my world, now this is not technically correct because OCD is its own diagnostic category, but it's right next, it's in the neighborhood. It's right next door to the anxiety disorders. And there's a reason for that. In my world, health anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, and OCD, they're functionally non-distinguishable. The content is different. But in health anxiety, what we find, which we call really illness anxiety disorder in the DSM now, whatever, health anxiety is where your obsession is your health, or it could be even the health of your loved ones, your friends, your pets. People have health anxiety about not just them, but everybody that matters to them, every sentient being that matters to them. So you become obsessed with protecting your health. The feared outcome is that something is wrong health-wise, which we all agree is important, by the way. And then we run through a series of compulsions, most of which are mental. So in health anxiety, it's primarily mental. You may find people Googling and obsessively looping through Facebook groups for this disorder and that disorder. So that's behavioral. But really, you are obsessed with protecting your health, and you lose the ability to discern what you are actually controlling and what you are not. So the mental compulsions and the behavioral compulsions that are driven by that obsession feel like protection, but they are not. They're not at all. So you can liken it to a person maybe with OCD who has one of those themes that nobody understands because clearly, wiping your counter a second time doesn't prevent a comet from hitting the earth. You would understand that. Well, guess what? Looping through the same worry again and again and actively because you think that keeps you on guard and protected has nothing to do with your health. Zero. There is zero impact. Those compulsions protect you 0%. None. I can't say that enough. 0% protection through compulsion. None. Why? Because compulsion doesn't act on the topic. It acts on your fear. When you compulse and try to protect your health, you are only trying to feel better in that moment. You're not doing anything that's actually health related at all. Zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That makes sense?
This is so tough for people because you have to understand the backdrop, right? People with these vestibular problems often go through a sort of a traumatic health experience. They're often either dismissed or told, oh my gosh, I think you're having a heart attack or you have a brain tumor or you have cancer. The average person sees at least 10 doctors. I've seen people who have seen upward of 20, even 50 doctors to try to get a diagnosis. Now, at some point we might argue, did they really need to see that many doctors to get a diagnosis? We were already heavily into health anxiety by that point.
100%.
But in some cases, legitimately, there was some kind of vestibular problem and it wasn't found until they got to the right specialist and they waited 6 or 8 months to get to that specialist or longer.
Yeah.
So they're coming with this background of actually being told the wrong things are wrong with them, or there is something wrong, or there isn't something wrong. Then they actually find out something is wrong or isn't wrong, and they have these symptoms. They're super confused. And so they often will not see what you just described. They won't see that it's transitioned. I keep talking about this transition. I just want to hammer this point home for everyone.
Yeah.
There's a transition point when dizziness becomes something akin to health anxiety for some people. And that's what ends up being the primary driver after that.
Yeah.
It's not that at the beginning for a lot of people. It can be an actual physical problem, but
Right.
there's a transition point, and that gets really opaque. What you described, it's not always, people are blinded to it. They don't see it.
Oh, yeah. And understandably, like, listen, this is not a thing that it's like, oh, you're doing it to yourself. You just got to chill out. Do not let anybody tell you that because that's nonsense. There's two things that happen here. First of all, your past experience is part of what creates your current subjective experience, right? So when your brain is deciding what to label your present moment, it's going to access past experiences. 100% correct. And you should be advocating for yourself, right? If there is legitimately a problem, and unfortunately it took you 10 different physicians to find the problem, we have to actually honor that actually happened, right? However,
So the solution's trauma therapy, right?
no. However, I mean, maybe. Well, listen, maybe more than one thing could be true at a time, right?
Right. True.
I will speak quickly to that. Sometimes, well, this is a whole different topic, but
Yeah.
I'm quite sure in the environment we're in right now, which is good but bad, anybody who has a particular health issue, in your case, maybe it's dizziness or vestibular issues, if I keep looking for a solution, I will find an unlimited number of solutions.
Absolutely.
Because we are now immersed in an environment where everybody can claim that they can fix you. They don't even have to have qualifications, evidence, nothing. They just have to say the right words and promise something to you. And a suffering person will go for the carrot. I don't blame them at all. And they can be led to that. Okay, fair enough. But just because you had a medical gaslighting or a medical trauma experience, which is correct, and we have to honor that and respect that experience, does not mean that compulsing over your health now is effective. It explains why you're doing it, but it still doesn't make it effective. And the second prong of that, I think what makes that so opaque is people will say, but this is so important. No, health is important. I'm sure you're not arguing that it's not. Your health is 100% important. The health of your loved ones, your pets, your family, your friends are important. It still doesn't mean that your compulsions have any impact on it at all. I don't want a comet to hit the earth today. That's really important. But the way I tie my shoes, no matter how hard I want that to protect me from a comet, doesn't. It just doesn't. So it's a really hard thing for people to get a grip on. Like, I can honor the difficult experience that I've had, recognize why it's informing my actions now, but I also have to learn to start to change the way I interact with this.
That's exactly it. So there are people I've seen who were legitimately traumatized by what they went through, maybe prior to the symptoms, but also by the experience of having the symptoms, and then just daily life with these freaking symptoms. That's really bad. It's bad. It can be traumatizing.
Yeah.
And that does mean for some people there is work to be done there. The issue is recognizing that that doesn't automatically mean this health anxiety piece is going to go away. It's not like you release the trauma. Like I hear people talk about that. I released the emotions. I released the trauma. Why is everything the same? Because if you have a process in place and that process is intact, the process you described, then that keeps the arousal going. That keeps the symptoms going. That keeps the anxiety going.
Yeah. It's not, people like me often talk about process versus content. It's one of the foundations of my practice. I hate to be, this is going to sound dismissive, but I want it to sound dismissive. Imagine you're on a flight and you're a little nervous about turbulence. If you look around and the cabin crew is just cracking jokes and serving drinks and like not reacting at all, they're shrugging their shoulders at the turbulence, that's a good thing. You want to see that. So I want to shrug my shoulders at your content. So I don't care if you have health anxiety, OCD, panic disorder, doesn't matter what you have. I want to give you a confident, you're okay. And we're not going to talk about the content. It doesn't matter how dizzy you are. It does, because I want you to feel better.
Yes.
What we care about is the process. So in health anxiety, it has nothing to do with the health. It has everything to do with the anxiety, because you're only trying to operate on the anxiety, and the anxiety or the fear or the uncertainty is what tells you that you have a health problem. See how backwards that is? If you weren't super anxious about dizziness on a day where you don't have any dizziness, if you didn't have that simmering, but is it going to come back? You would not be thinking about dizziness. It's all about the anxiety, not the health.
Yep.
Yeah. And we got to work on that.
We do. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. I'm going to give you a tough idea here. So, okay. For some people, it is intermittent, like what you described. They'll have days when they feel better or worse. But when people are dealing with this initially, and when I say initially, it could be years in. What I mean is when they're dealing with this and they haven't realized that there's some kind of role of a neural circuit issue or an anxiety issue involved, this can go on for years. They'll have 24/7 symptoms that are just sky high. The anxiety is just through the roof, and they can't even necessarily tell the difference between like what's anxiety, what's symptom, what's this, what's that. So can you walk us through what does changing that start to look like? What do we actually have to do?
Yeah. I think for me, the first thing I do when I encounter somebody like that is you have to recognize that this is actually happening to you. This is not it's in your head. None of what I think, I'll speak for Dr. Yo here. I don't think either of us is saying it's just in your head or you're making this problem. That's not it at all. So first we're going to acknowledge and validate the fact that you are legitimately uncomfortable and probably afraid right now. So almost every intervention that I will use in my practice starts with just say you're afraid. It's okay. Trying to pretend that you're not upset by this is pointless because you are. I am in the reality business, which is even though we hate this reality and we want it gone, if I cannot get it gone in this moment, then what do I do with that? So first, we're going to acknowledge, yes, you are genuinely uncomfortable right now. If you always make that the biggest, most important thing in the room by choice, I have no other option to respond to this difficult experience but to put it front and center and fight and push against it, even though I lose every time because it's here. I can't make it go away. Can I develop a different way to interact with it? This is a hard sell, of course, but I would direct your attention to things like mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I'm sure you are aware of. Mm-hmm. The MBSR folks, led by John Kabat-Zinn back in the early 70s, have a absolutely stellar track record. And we use MBSR and variants of that in chronic pain, chronic illness, terminal illness situations. These are people that where the medical folks kind of threw their hands up and sent them over to that clinic over at UMass way back in the 70s and said, I don't know, see what you could do with them. And as it turns out, in a very large number of cases, the person that goes through the 8-week MBSR training will say, my pain hasn't changed because it wasn't gonna. It's unmanageable chronic pain, or my illness hasn't changed. Right. In this case, maybe dizziness. Right now, it's still here, but my quality of life has improved. That there's a magic in there. It's not magic. There's a reason why in third wave treatments like people like me use, these are not control or cognitive restructuring or logic or talk yourself or ground yourself or calm yourself. These are acceptance and mindfulness based treatments.
Right.
Because the first thing we have to do is accept that sometimes we have a reality that we effing hate, to speak frankly, but there's nothing I can do about it. So fighting it and insisting, no, there's something I got to do about it is pointless. We find this in all the world's great philosophies and faiths even, right? Give it up in whatever form that says. Now, what do? I have to be able to build an awareness of the fact that I instantly go into resistance and fixing mode, and I have to learn maybe I have another option here. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I have to practice that.
Yep.
That was a lot of words. I'm really sorry.
No, I mean, as I said at the beginning, this is supposed to be an interview, but I also knew I'd be doing a lot of talking because this is also a meeting of the minds. So
yeah, that's okay.
Right. So, okay. First thing, I just have to say how much I agree with the idea that you cannot do anything with the reality until you accept the reality as it is.
That's
period.
The key in acceptance and commitment there.
It's just, you got to start there.
Yeah.
From my perspective, as someone who works with people with chronic dizziness who can actually fully recover because the symptoms are being driven by all of this stuff that we're talking about today entirely in most cases. Honestly, I would say probably 80% of the people watching my channel, anyone out there with PPPD, vestibular migraine, MDDS, these kinds of diagnoses that are symptom-based, where there's nothing physically wrong, mm-hmm. These are neuroplastic. Your brain can change. Your brain can rewire. It's being driven by factors like what we're talking about. And in that case, if we remove those factors, your brain can do what it needs to do and get better.
Sure.
But you have to start by saying, right now, it's not okay. You can't start by saying, this is not an acceptable place to be, because it's just like you said, sort of way earlier in the conversation, that's giving your brain a particular message. It's giving your brain a particular set of instructions. Keep this going. This is very bad. This is very dangerous. Yeah. You got to you're focusing on this. I'm going to keep you focused on it. Yeah. Oh, you want more focus on this? Let me give you more focus on this. So the reality is we have to start there. And I always tell people, you can, especially in my world where, again, I work with people who can recover. I say, it's okay to add a little parentheses for now.
Yeah.
I accept the reality for now, but you have to go all in with accepting reality before you can go anywhere.
Yeah. And which is another hard sell. The principle, the principle of radical acceptance applies here, right? Mm-hmm. But and I'm asked all the time, you are probably too, when we use the word acceptance, I just call it stop fighting it. Like, because acceptance has a really weird connotation. It's the A in acceptance commitment therapy, which I'm a huge fan of, and I use ACT in my practice all the time. However, the word acceptance is often misinterpreted as, I'm okay with this. No. It has nothing to do with liking it, being okay with it, loving it, embracing it, like choosing positivity, vibrating in a different plane. It has nothing to do with that. You are allowed to say, I encourage my clients to say, I hate this. You're allowed to hate it. But even though I hate it, the hate it exists. You can't not hate. So it's okay. Acknowledge your emotions right now. And that hate makes me want to. fill in the blank. It makes me want to like go and Google again. It makes me want to log back into Dr. Yo's WhatsApp or whatever it is you guys got going on. And I see it all the time. It makes me want to go back to my Facebook group. It makes me want to message that person who said she had this problem 3 years ago. And let me see how she's doing. That's what the hate and the discomfort makes me want to do. Stop. And this is where mindfulness comes into it. Can I see that my discomfort is driving me down a road that leads me nowhere, but greater and greater agitation, which I love that you're saying, yeah, of course. And then if you are one of those type of presentations, you call it a neural circuit. Yeah. Why do people with panic disorder think like, I don't understand. I don't want to have this problem anymore. I know, right. But you have to let yourself have the problem to not have the problem.
Yes. Mic drop right there. Yeah, you need to let yourself have the problem to not have the problem.
If you want to stop being afraid, you got to learn to be afraid.
Yes.
I hate that, but it is true. So,
yes.
And what can I tell you? I will tell you flat out that in the therapy world, people like me, the anxiety disorder specialist, we're weird. We're looked at strange. Like it doesn't sit right with a helper. And I'll give you a little anecdote that may illustrate why this is so hard, even for the helpers. When we look at therapists and we study therapy, like for outcome research and things of that nature, you will find therapists that say on a very wide scale, I do know that acceptance, exposure, mindfulness, allowing is in fact the most effective way. I'm not arguing with that data, but I can't let my client suffer that way. So they will default away from it and try to teach control strategies because the client also wants to hear control strategies. And the therapist is too uncomfortable. When we look at exposure interventions and see subjectively who reports discomfort, often the therapist reports greater discomfort than the client. So it is strange to tell somebody to intentionally allow themselves to be uncomfortable. But that's the only way that we have to get to the other side of this.
It is.
It's a crappy deal, I say all the time, but it's a deal we got. We didn't invent this. Yeah. It just happens to be the way we're wired.
Yes. And we promise we will delete this interview from YouTube and give you 5 somatic exercises if it turns out that that's actually the solution instead. But in the meantime, this is what we've got.
This is the best we got. Yeah. And, not everything in the world is evidence-based. That is 100% true. But it's hard to argue with the outcomes here. We do have better outcomes when we learn to do it this way. It's just a harder path to take. And I start with that all the time. This is a simple plan. It's just really hard to execute. Because it requires sort of courage. It requires a willingness to accept that, like, sometimes the world gives me things that I can't stop or control. What do I do with that? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So what are you actually suggesting people with dizziness do? Non-do, right? And I might interject and give some of my feedback as well, because it's a tricky little dance. Because I'm also trying to help people who've been told they're broken. And so on one hand, there's some amount of education. I know there's some amount of education that needs to go into them really understanding and internalizing I'm not broken. And sometimes initially that does look like reassurance, but then we transition into it becoming actual reassurance. That's actually just a compulsion and it's feeding an obsession. So walk me through what you think someone with 24/7 dizziness symptoms who says, okay, yeah, the health anxiety is definitely a driver here. Yeah. What should they do?
I think so much of it is, well, we would first start, if you walked into my therapy practice and became one of my clients, we're going to have a psychoeducational phase, right? And you get to say whatever you want to say. If you want to dump what's on your mind and pressing on you for 3 weeks, I'm here for that. You got to do it, right? Okay. Once we do that and we discover that like everything I've been trying doesn't seem to be, air quotes, working, now we're going to say, well, you're here with me for a reason. You know who I am. You know what I do. So let's talk about that. Now we're going to introduce psychoeducation, the theories and the processes, which we're doing now in this video, right? Now I'm going to have to start to introduce an awareness type things. So for instance, I would say the person who recognizes that dizziness, we have to recognize that there's always going to be that's built in. We can't get rid of that. Right. Yeah. So, and it doesn't matter whether your vestibular issues created health anxiety and that neural circuit, or neural loop that Dr. Yo was talking about, or you have a different anxiety disorder that's related. There's always a triggering moment of, okay, you can't get rid of that. That's normal. We need that. That's what keeps you from stepping out into traffic. I care about, can you start to recognize when has led to right?
Yes.
We'll automatically, that's normal. You can't not do that. We're not some sort of like ninja level 9,000 Zen here where you're never triggered.
Right.
We need to recognize I have been triggered by an experience that I dislike or fear. And now I am pushing back against it. What can I do? So anybody who's recovered from any anxiety disorder, desensitized, whatever you want to call it, will still maybe have little trigger moments in their life. That's normal. That can happen. There's no delete button in your nervous system, by the way, or your brain. So those pathways do not get deleted. We only build alternate paths. But every once in a while, and a setback is just what happens when you're uncomfortable enough to jump back into the old path and the resistant path. Okay, fine. So we have to recognize, I had a moment, and then I automatically tensed. And now because I'm afraid of this experience and hate it so much, I'm going to keep tensing and resisting it. What would happen if I dropped my resistance to this? And we begin to experiment little by little. And very little by little sometimes with the coaching or the guidance from the clinician that's going to say, I know that this feels completely reckless to do this. I know and it's okay to, if your fear or discomfort rises in that moment because you're not clamping down on it. That's okay. Can we see what happens if you ride it out? Nothing is better than the first time a person rides through the peak and looks with this wide-eyed shock and like, I did it. They don't think it's possible. And then they do it. And then they recognize, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Now, the intervention of doing nothing sometimes is literally doing nothing. Sometimes it might be focusing on breath, not to calm down. There's nothing sacred or calming about breath. Sometimes it might be, I don't know, get up and touch your toes. You could do a get into your body thing. Does that fix anything? No, we don't techniqueify anything in my practice. Or it could be like, well, what do you want to do now? I want to keep fighting because I was triggered into... But what are my options? Well, what's in front of you right now? What were you doing? Were you writing an email? Were you talking to your friend? Were you petting your dog? Were you making lunch? Were you taking a walk? What were you doing? Go back to that. But nothing. Go back to that and experiment. See what happens. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, they learn little by little that like my experience actually changes if I interact with it in a different way.
Yeah. Yep. I have to say, I have a few things to say in response to what you said, but I just want to highlight one thing. What you just described, that peak experience that someone has and then them looking at you and being like, I did it.
Yeah.
It's just the coaches and therapists who intervene because of their own discomfort with that, they miss out on something so awesome.
Yeah.
When you get to see someone just find out just what they're made of, I mean, it's just the best feeling in the whole world. So I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you.
And that I'm broken sometimes comes from the instruction to calm down.
Right.
You can't allow that. You can't allow such a discomfort. Yeah, but what if you could?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'll frame it directly as the worse it feels, the better it is. I mean, to an extent.
A lot of people that I work with will do exposures and then I promise I'm going to shut up. And then they'll say like, oh, but I got so triggered. I know we want that.
That's what we want.
Is the right. The feeling is the exposure. We want that. That wasn't a failure. That's a good exposure. So,
exactly. That's it. Exactly it. No, exactly it. Yeah. So a couple things. So first of all, I'm all over the place because I have so much to say about this. No. First thing I want to say, I'm going to push back on the idea that there's no delete button in the brain. I think it's
you could push back. You would just be wrong.
Okay. I think it's a useful framing for people because I think the impulse to delete is actually a big part of the problem. And also it actually leads to you being less resilient and more dependent on outcomes than trusting yourself to think, oh, well, if I just try hard enough, I'm going to delete this. And oh, if something comes back or I have a sensation that I don't like, oh no, I'm going to melt down. And that means something really big. That's not good for people. Right. So I think whether I'm right or not, it's still useful to think of it that way. But I do think there are some neuroscience research, at least obviously in my field, which may or may not match up with anxiety research.
Yeah.
I think we see permanent rewiring. We see permanent rewiring that ends up leading to chronic symptoms, and then we see permanent rewiring that gets rid of them. And it's not getting rid of in the way that a lot of people watching this channel want it to be, like where you do this magical brain retraining program and then everything goes away. But right. The brain says, oh, your ear isn't working the way that it used to. Got it. Okay. So we just need to rebalance how we're interpreting vestibular information from the two ears, and that's it. It's a process that's just done. I'm thinking of memory reconsolidation research where specific emotional learnings are, again, this is still a little bit theoretical, and I think that some of it obviously is based on animal research that may not generalize to humans, but some of it seems to be applicable, at least behaviorally, to humans, where we see effortless change. So it's not like I have to now remind myself to be nice to myself and be compassionate to myself because the inner critic is always lurking in the background and I need to fight it off. It's just that response is no longer there. It's just not there anymore.
Except when somebody comes, I'm sorry, I'm stepping on you.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm do really. You want to finish? Is there more? I'm sorry. That was
no. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a school of thought that these changes are permanent and that they don't come back even when someone's under stress.
Okay, why people like me really pay a lot of attention to stress inoculation and relapse prevention because we know, because we can see it in many, many, many real world human cases, it's not animal research, that people who overcome anxiety disorders will relapse in times of stress. So I agree with you that the new pathway and the rewiring is permanent. That doesn't go away. It is always available to us. But there's a reason why people with health anxiety, panic disorder, agoraphobia, OCD, social, all the anxiety disorders are susceptible to relapse. And they are susceptible to relapse when under times of stress. So have you ever had somebody leave your coaching program and then come back because they've had a
Of course, but the majority of them don't. So
but that's right.
It can happen.
But that's because, and here's my assertion here, every one of my clients that graduates from therapy may find themselves in what they see as a setback. But if they have accepted the process and can pay attention to the process, they will catch, oh, wait, I went back to the old ways for 3 days and then they reset. The old ways simply do not get deleted. They just don't. And we see that in relapse studies again and again and again and again. Also, if we look at SREF and relational frame theory, that's underneath a lot of the stuff that I do, those relational frames never disappear. It would be biologically and evolutionary disadvantageous for there to be a delete button in our brains. So we never lose relations from one thing to another. You can't delete that. Once the connection is made between one frame and another, it just simply never goes away, no matter how hard we try to retrain it away. I can build a new preferred frame connection from one frame to another. But in certain instances, I'm going to get scared or upset or stressed enough to go back to the idea that control and resistance feels safer again. Now, they don't come back to you because they catch that and then they adjust again. But the people who do come back probably just need a gentle reminder like, oh, it's okay. It's not that your thing came back again. You're fighting it again, right? And you got to give them a quick refresher as to like, oh yeah, do what helped you in the past. Oh, that's right. And then they go back and they're on their way again. So I don't think there's a problem that there's a no delete button. In fact, I don't like the idea that we use the idea of rewiring your brain as a permanent fix, because then if they do experience that,
that's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah,
why it's like, helpful to think of it this way.
Right. Like I don't, because then we're looking for outcomes. I'm never going to feel this way again. And I can never guarantee somebody.
Right. So that last point I completely agree with, but I can't speak for the anxiety neuroscience research. I know what I know, and that's outside of the area of my professional expertise, I suppose, although who knows nowadays. But let me just say, I would agree with you that like when your brain learns to sort of recalibrate and know how to handle that different, that doesn't go away. You're right. And that's always going to be available to you. You're right. I'm talking about the person's response to the experience. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So actually let's square that for people.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that we seem to agree that there is some kind of rewiring process that the brain can engage in, at least in some domains.
Yeah.
At least in the vestibular domain, it seems to be the case.
Yeah. In almost all domains, really.
Really. Yeah. I mean, we think about people who have strokes and learn to, walk again or whatever. So the brain is perfectly capable of rewiring, but that doesn't absolve you of responsibility to keep an eye on your responses, because you can fall back into that.
That's exactly right.
Right. So I think we can agree on 100% on that. Maybe I just am overly optimistic about what the brain is capable of, because I just see so much crazy stuff in my work. Things that just shouldn't be possible are possible. So it's hard for me to imagine that a brain that has this particular kind of circuit is uniquely unable to change it in a permanent way. But I respect your expertise on that.
Yeah. And I kind of think we're in agreement, to be honest with you. I don't think we actually disagree on this. I will tell you that one thing that I tend to avoid. Neuroscience is wonderful. I never reference it. And I'll tell you why. Because when we do that whole neuroscience research says, which we've done a lot in the last 5 years, and way the F overreached on this, reputable neuroscientists must be running under their kitchen tables. Well, you all stop saying neuroscience because you're giving us a bad name. And these are the circles that I tend to travel in sometimes. We overreach. The research says that this happens, but that research never actually said that, or they were animal studies, like you said, and they directly conflict with research in my field. So maybe in 10 more years, we'll have a better feeling, and I might be able to say, I'll call you up. Hey, Dr. Yo, you were right. There's a delete button. Who knew? That would be awesome. I would love that. Right? But right now, we just have too much conflicting data, and I think we rely a little bit too heavily on the idea that the data says this, so I do that, and then I get an outcome. We are so much more complicated than, and I'm an evidence-based guy. That's my life. But I also understand that there's limitations to that. So I think we tend to agree, to be honest with you. I just wouldn't tell people neuroscience says that your brain will rewire permanently.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And that's why I preface this entire friendly debate for those of you out there with concerns about conflict. They're holding their chest oh my gosh, are they just going to
go at each other's throats? Yeah.
But in terms of what needs to be done, here's how I think about it.
Yeah.
Your brain is a miraculous machine that we do not fully understand. We see things that shouldn't be possible based on our understanding of neuroscience right now. Right. For right now, it's useful not to think of trying to delete parts of your brain and delete circuits in your brain. And the way that I tend to frame it, what you're talking about is through the stress bucket. So I talk about how when your bucket is full of stress, your brain starts to do things like over respond to potential stressors or to potential threats. And that I tell people very flat out, the way you live your life needs to change to get better. Yeah. Period. It needs to change. And that doesn't necessarily feel like effort. It doesn't necessarily feel like I'm constantly on guard and trying to watch out for this, but it means that you're going to need to treat yourself and your thoughts and other reactions that you have differently. Yeah.
One of the podcasts I do is called Disordered, and tomorrow or Friday, we're doing a stress jug.
No kidding.
Literally doing an episode on
so
stress.
Wild.
That's Josh, as my co-host, says the stress jug was his thing. So you use stress bucket.
Oh, never. That is so fantastic. That's fantastic.
Stress bucket. I love the stress bucket. I'm with you on the stress bucket. When the stress bucket is full and overflowing, we will tend to respond by over-controlling. I know. We used to do that. We learned how to not do that. And then we get tricked into doing it again because there's no delete button on the over-response. I think we're on the same page. That's all I'm saying, right?
Yeah. There's no delete. So I want people to hear that. I think this is what we're coming to. There's no delete button on the over response.
Correct.
So your brain can rewire and change, and it's wonderful, and you can live a happy, fulfilled life. And you got to just make sure you don't over respond.
Yeah, you're just paying attention. This is not constant. And I agree with you. We don't want to tell somebody you have to constantly be on guard against over. No, it's not that at all. Sometimes it's just, crap, I did it again. And they recognize it and you adjust. That happens to everybody. That's okay. It's totally fine. Happens to me too. It happens to all of us. So I promise we're not we don't have pitchforks pointed at each other. It's all good.
I know people, again, I feel the temperature rising from people watching this. We're good. That's why I said at the very beginning, I knew we'd get into it a little bit today. So it's awesome. It's awesome to get to do this with someone. So, okay. So I wanted to come back to something you were saying about what someone might do during an exposure. Because, Drew, I never thought that I would need to be so heavily trained in anxiety stuff, but it turns out I did need to be because just the dizziness. And one of the things that I am trained in is ERP, obviously. And I also worked with a mentor who integrates parts work into ERP. So parts work meaning IFS.
I'm tapping out. Nope.
You're tapping out.
Tapping out. Uh-oh, the pitchforks are out again. No, IFS has no role in ERP, zero. Because we're trying to mediate their fear response, and that kind of dampens the effect, though.
Well, so the way it's used actually is not to dampen.
Because okay. I like IFS and I like parts work and I love family systems and it resonates with me personally. I'm going to insert it where it doesn't belong. I will line up 1,000 ERP therapists that would run that person out of town. That's not ERP. Sorry, it's just not.
I will actually disagree with you on this one too, because I completely agree that if it were used the way most IFS is used, then it's not going to be helpful.
This is a special modulated, unique
This is a very specific. This is a very specific form. It's not typical like, oh, let's talk to the parts, let's soothe, let's be with the exile. So again, for those of you out there listening who are familiar with parts work, because I've talked about that on my channel before, this is different from let's release the burdens and I'll live in la la la. I'm going to use the word management, even though I hate it. Mm-hmm. This is more this is probably the wrong term to use, but it's more of a self-management tool. What I mean by that is it's a way to operationalize acceptance or a way to operationalize doing nothing, where you know the parts and you ask them to stand down and they stand back so you can just do the exposure and they don't interfere.
Okay. I mean, I'm not arguing against parts work or IFS. I'm just not sure that I would call that an ERP IFS combination. Hear me out.
You'd call that ERP.
I would call that ERP. That's
what it is. It's ERP.
Right. Yeah, so here's where, and I think again, when we talk about it, and this is such a great conversation, we're actually on the same page, and I'll tell you why. Yes. My podcast, which coming out right now, The Anxious Truth this week, is about exactly this. The person who does acceptance, and I'm doing air quotes because there's no doing acceptance, or does exposure and does the tolerance, or like, I'm going to move through the peak, can sometimes never learn a lesson from that. And that is because there are parts of them that come into that process that say, no, this is failure. The fact that you have this problem to begin with is an issue.
That's exactly
right. We need to protect ourselves. We're not allowed to feel this way because it ruined everything in my family. And I was told to just stay chill, or I'm ruining mom and dad's day.
Yes.
That is what we care about before the ERP.
Yes.
That makes sense? So like the ERP is in fact ERP, just that you're recognizing the resistance before you go in. I'm with you.
That's exactly how it looks. It looks like enabling radical allowing. That's what it looks like when it's used appropriately. So
but it's still a form of exposure, because act like you're.
Oh no, it's 100% exposure.
Act like you're not. Feel like you're screwed. Act like you're not. Feel like you're these days. Act like you're not. In the end,
it's 100%. It helped. I think it's just a way of helping people not just white knuckle, but actually just go, take me. All right.
Right.
Bring it on. Like fully. Like it's going to be a 10 out of 10. We're going to do 10 out of 10.
And the thing that sucks about this, and the reason why I started pushing back so hard, is I know this is just experience talking. And I was that person, by the way. I suffered from the problems that I write and talk about. Yes. This isn't just book knowledge. I lived it. I know what it's like to be too afraid to open the door of my house to walk to my car. I get it 4 hours at a time, right? If you give an anxious mind that is on protection and safety overload and like stuck in that rut, if you will, the opportunity to make it a little bit more gentle, it will take it. And we find that the outcomes from the exposure tend to be dampened.
Yes.
So we, in the ERP world, we're almost so militant about it. Like, no, we have to strip this down to like, let the peak happen and then look back and say, what did I learn about that? That's the only reason why we are so resistant to like,
I understand that. No softening. Okay. Yeah. No softening.
Yeah. No softening.
No. And so that's the message I want to get across to people. So this is just kind of tying back into what I was saying about there are lots of good tools and there are lots of good tools that can be used poorly. Yeah. So if you out there, if parts work resonates with you, from my perspective, at least from what I've seen, it can actually help you get to the point where you can just go in and be fully in that peak and just let it all go. Yeah. But not if you're using it in a softening way, like, oh, I'm going to bring this in with me. And then this part is like protecting me. And then, I don't have to feel it as much, or this is going to fix it, or I'm going to manage it using this stuff. No, this is the only way that it can be used effectively in exposures is if it gives you a way to to notice those parts of you that want to avoid, want to soften, want to get rid of some kind of thing. And you teach yourself how to say, all of you, I need you to stand down so I can actually just do this fully.
Yeah, we're doing this. Yeah. And
we're doing this.
It's really hard to come to grips with that. And I understand why people embrace those things. I often say, no one is an anxiety disorder with arms and legs. They're whole people, right? So even people with vestibular issues that develop health anxiety, there are other issues, and we use other frameworks and treatments in that stuff. What nobody in my practice just talks about their anxiety. And that's a beautiful thing, right? So what we care about is that part is like the setup to the exposure. Yeah, that's my setup, right? That's where I'm going to have to. And it may take, I always tell people, like, if you are struggling to get to that point, you'll get there when you get there, because that's the other stuff that's coming in. Evidently, everybody has to get to the point in their own way, for their own reasons, where they say, I really, really want to keep telling. And we see like the misguided integration of other theories into ERP or exposure when people start doing mantras like, oh, thank you for protecting me. Hand on the heart. I know you're just trying to protect me. Hug my inner child. No, we can't do that. I know that sucks.
That's so tricky. Yep. That's so tricky. Thank you for speaking to that.
At the point where we understand that for now, for the next 15 minutes, I need to leave that stuff at the door, and then I'll pick it up on the other side, because it might help me learn lessons from my experience. And that's so hard for people to do. I understand why. I get it. And
so tricky, because one of the seminal tools in the mind-body world, so the neuroplastic treatment world, where we have symptoms that are the result of feelings and distress, and they're not indicative that there's a permanent medical problem. So these are, again, people whose symptoms can go away because it's being driven by central sensitization.
Yeah.
Right. So these are symptoms that are not that don't need to be permanent.
Okay.
One of the most commonly used practices is something called somatic tracking. Mm-hmm. You're sensitive to the word somatic, and you're going to hear this, and your ERP therapist heart is going to get angry again.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, I knew this would be a great conversation.
Yeah, it's great.
So it's a practice of responding neutrally to your sensations. Okay, and it sounds great, and for a lot of people, it's absolutely game changing. Because basically what you're doing is just sitting with a sensation without trying to fix it. Okay. Sounds great on paper. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sounds great. And for most people, it's really helpful. But what I've noticed is when people are now in anxiety disorder land, when we're dealing with now health anxiety, they start to use somatic tracking as a tool to try to get rid of symptoms. Like, I'm supposed to do this thing. And they're softening the experience of the symptoms rather than trying to let it be there. So they're saying, I'm having this like headache now. I'm gonna track it. I'm gonna somatic track it, and I'm gonna somatic track it away. And did it work? Did it work? Did it work? Okay, maybe I didn't do it enough. Maybe I need to do it 3 times a day. Maybe I need to do it for 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes. And it becomes this. It's a great tool being used poorly.
Yeah. I mean, that's I'm not that guy. I promise. I'm pretty adamant. But like, there are times when I've come to loggerheads a little bit with the somatic experiencing. I'm doing somatic experiencing. Okay, that's not news. We just gave it a label called somatic tracking or somatic experiencing. If you're going to go into allowance, acceptance, learn from that experience mode, you have no choice but to see and feel. It's going to be in your face. So the reason why I get a little bit iffy on the somatic thing is like, it's not news. We're just using the word, and that's fine if we want to use the word. But when we use mindfulness-based interventions, like an MBSR, which is not really a therapy intervention, but like it's all based on that stuff, we're literally teaching people, instead of running away from the sensation, turn around and actually look at it.
That's right.
So, exactly right. And that's okay. But that's part of the acceptance process. Not to make it go away, I'll literally teach a person in session, like, well, tell me exactly what it is you feel. Oh, my heart is pounding. They'll say, it feels like. We use that work to short circuit the mistaken conclusion. So in this present moment, tell me what's happening. It feels like I'm going to have no, feels like is a prediction. Tell me what you actually feel. My heart is racing. Is it going fast or is it heavy? Is it sharp? Is it galloping? Is it skipping? Tell me what it's doing. And it takes the prediction out of the equation. And then they start to recognize like, oh yeah, what's happening is I feel my heart pounding against my spine, and that scares me and it makes me want to fix it. Mm-hmm. So there's no conflict here. We are on the same page.
We are on the same page.
To stay far away from trying to we're going to do somatic tracking now. we're going to do somatic experiencing. Now you're doing it. That's true by the people who define it that way. But like, I tend not to do that. We're just going to just tell me what's going on. Let's strip it down to the barest bones. Right. So,
yeah. Gosh. I'm hearing this, and one of my newest ambitions for 2026, we'll see if I manage to do this, is helping people figure out which of these two camps they fall in. Because I see there are two camps of people with chronic dizziness and other multisensory symptoms. There are people who do not currently have a health anxiety loop going. They don't have an anxiety disorder. I'm using the term anxiety disorder process because I don't know that they would meet a diagnostic.
Yeah, but it sure
checklist.
Looks like it, right?
Right. It sure looks like it. Yeah. So I think some people, this is why they have symptoms and this is what they need to do, everything we're describing today. And then for other people, the second bucket or the first bucket, which I have lots of buckets in my life, I guess, there's also the stress bucket. There's the happiness bucket. I mean, there's the puke bucket. So this other group of people they might have anxiety, but they don't, like you said, they might have anxiety all day long, but not have the disordered aspect of it.
That's right.
And for them, somatic experiencing, parts work, feeling your emotions, nervous system regulation stuff is the ticket. It actually addresses the problem.
Yeah.
So I have a video in which I took my first stab at it. Again, it's my ambition for 2026. I'm wondering if you might be able to help clarify this for people. Like, how do they know if they're looking back on this interview wide-eyed and are like, oh my God, this is everything I haven't been doing. Do I need to be doing this instead? How can they know?
To me, it's hard. Sometimes you can't know. That's true. There's no black or white in human beings, unfortunately, which sucks.
Oh, I know.
Generally speaking, I'm looking for what is the problem in the moment? Is the problem, I'm so dizzy? Okay, then that's the problem. And now you can maybe use those sort of like general wellness regulation calming tools because you understand that the problem is the dizziness. I'm feeling dizzy and it's, I gotta make sure I don't fight this. Cool.
Right. Yes.
If you are trying to address the fear or the discomfort that the dizziness is making, I can't handle this feeling. Now you may be in a situation where you're trying to control a thing that you can't control. Right? Because the checking mechanism will say, I'm still feeling it. I'm still anxious. I'm still upset. Like, okay, but just be upset and let it run its course. We don't know. We don't always know. And sometimes it takes a while. What I find is when I work with people, as they get better, they will continue to try to view any instance of stress or anxiety or distress as a disorder recovery problem. And we have to learn, no, not all stress or anxiety is disordered anxiety. And this is where, go write in your journal, like take a walk, go to the beach. Like now you can use those things.
Yes.
There you go. So am I concerned about the experience as it's happening? I don't want to say outside of me because the vestibular is happening inside of you, but like, I understand why I feel this way. I get it. I'm stressed or anxious because I'm dizzy. You're good to go with the other stuff. If you just care that I'm overwhelmed by this and you're trying to deal with the overwhelm, now you're on the other side. We just got to let that overwhelm fall off.
Right.
Does that make sense? I don't know if I described that well.
I'm going to pare it down and you tell me if you agree with this potential rule of thumb, even because recognizing this is so tricky for dizziness because of the anxiety component that is inherent to dizziness. It's just, it can be totally crazy. So here's what I tell people. I tell people at first, you need the education. At first, it makes sense to get the information. Watch a bunch of videos on my channel, watch some success stories, just so that you have some context for understanding what's possible here and what you're dealing with. Try some of the simplest tools. You try somatic tracking, you try breathing. Try it for a week. And then ask yourself honestly, is that making my fear and anxiety worse? Am I becoming paranoid? Am I becoming superstitious? Like, oh, I must not be doing it hard enough. Notice your own reactions to the tools that you're using. And if you find yourself moving into this relationship with the symptoms and tools that involves you trying to fix them or manage your fear and anxiety away, that's when we say, okay, we may need a strategic adjustment here. Now we start using the kinds of strategies that we talked about today.
Yeah. And it's hard to tell, right? Sometimes it's one, sometimes the other.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be a little bit of both, I guess. But yeah, I hear you. I mean, for me, as a former sufferer of panic disorder, agoraphobia, and
Yes.
diagnosable OCD. When I get vertigo, at first I would be trying to calm down. But what I had to learn, if this helps illustrate it at all, as somebody who had an anxiety disorder, recovered anxiety disorder guy, is I can now say, oh, I'm feeling really anxious or upset here because the room is spinning and my eyes are shaking and I can't focus. So the anxiety is I see my psychological state as 100% connected to the fact that my body is doing a thing that I wish it wasn't doing at the moment.
Right.
So I don't have to try to calm down. I just have to let crystals in my ear. I can do the Foster maneuver or whatever it is I do. Right.
You're not afraid of the fear.
Right. That's exactly right.
You're not afraid of the fear.
Not afraid of the feeling. Anxiety disorders are being anxious about being anxious.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So now we're going to pare it down even more for those of you who are like, okay, do I need to change course? Are you afraid of anxiety? If you are afraid of anxiety, then you may want to listen to, you may want to rewind. You may want to listen to more of what we just said today because this applies to you.
Yeah.
If you're anxious and just don't like it, but you're not necessarily afraid of it and predicting it and trying to escape it all the time, then it makes sense to start with some of these other tools that involve regulation or reacting differently.
I might add one thing that could be helpful to that too, that sometimes we work with, is your anxious state feeding into your prediction, like your long-term prognosis machine, right? Inside. So if somebody is feeling dizzy in the moment and recognizes, oh, I'm really anxious because I'm dizzy, they may not draw a forever conclusion like there's nothing, I'm screwed, I'm hopeless, nothing, this is never going to get better, what's wrong with me? The person who is focused on the feeling, they draw conclusions. I always say in anxiety disorders, you feel because. Someone with health anxiety feels therefore. So if you are in I feel, therefore I am screwed, you're probably in the acceptance, let it ride.
Okay.
Right?
Really important point. And this is why I said, even if you fall into that camp, you still need to watch videos on my channel to have your mind changed first, because most people with chronic dizziness are basically told you can't get better. They're told you can't get better. So they come in with, regardless of which bucket they fall into, anxiety or not, they come in with that preconception. This is something you're stuck with forever. So at first you need to have your mind opened, and I explain it logically. I explain it in very simple ways, in many different ways on my channel. And you can see it again, also in the success stories. People do recover from this. What you've been told is flat out wrong a lot of the time. It's from people who don't understand what these disorders actually are. And then after that, there's this transition point that I keep alluding to, where your reliance on constantly seeking information and reassurance and using tools in particular ways is actually feeding the problem rather than helping you.
Yeah, I hear you. If you've been told you're broken, but you're not, that's terrible.
It's awful.
Your anxious or upset or overwhelmed state then becomes confirmation of that.
That's right.
Oh, you told me that I'm broken and I feel so overwhelmed that it must be true. No, that's a mistake. That's don't get tricked into that. Right. So.
Right. They're told you can't get better. So their anxiety and fear go up. So their symptoms go up. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. So we have to break that part first with some education. Sure. And then from there, you can decide which of these two paths do I need to take.
You talked a lot, and I know you want to end, and I appreciate this. I'll piggyback on top of watch the videos to have your mind changed. I always tell people, no, nothing I say will change your belief. I would encourage you, if you're trying to put what Dr. Yo says into practice in your vestibular challenges, but you can't seem to believe that she's right, it's okay to not believe it. The belief will follow the change in action.
Yes.
Okay, if you can't believe it, I promise.
Thank you. What an amazing way to end this conversation. I just had this conversation with my coaching group yesterday, where I said something like, I'm an evidence person. Like, hope's great. And like me being like nice and seems like a nice person who's an expert, and like all these other people who've recovered, like that's all nice. Hard evidence from your own life is the only thing that matters. So go get that evidence.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. Drew, this was fun.
It really was.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
theanxioustruth.com. We'll lead you to all the stuff.
Okay. Highly recommend those of you who, with any of the things we talked about today, the Disordered Guide to Health Anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Pick up a copy. Yes.
Look at that.
Great.
Look at me selling a book.
I could not help but recommend it because it is awesome. I read this and I was like fist pumping the whole time I read it. So highly recommended. You can find it where books are sold.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank
Yo.
you. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here. Please, let us know what you think of this episode. Please comment here on YouTube if you're listening on YouTube, or if you hear it as a podcast, please give the podcast a follow. I'd also appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. All of these things just help expand my reach and bring information like this to people who need it, even when what we're saying is not super popular or doesn't involve nervous system regulation. So thank you to all of you. And thanks again, Drew. We'll see you next time.